A man finds gaps in his memories. What is the significance of things he does remember? I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about an interesting short story that I have found. One that comes from a collection from a familiar author who I've explored their graphic novels and books and other such things, just regular comics and whatnot. And so today's short story is about forgetting and Ray Bradbury. I am referring to The Man Who Forgot Ray Bradbury by Neil Gaiman, which was published in 2015 in his short story collection Trigger Warning. I've talked about Neil Gaiman on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail. But for those who don't know, Neil Gaiman is a British author known for writing graphic novels and comic books primarily, with the Sandman series as well as How to Talk to Girls at Parties, and he's written a couple of other series too. And then he's also written a number of books, including American Gods, which I've read before, as well as The Ocean at the End of the Lane, another high quality book, and then Norse mythology, which he is sort of nonfiction, and he's just written quite a few things, some of which I've loved, some of which I haven't really enjoyed. But he is a pretty high quality author, and I'd consider him one of the better authors of the past 20 to 30 years. He's been writing since the 80s. Very much in line with Alan Moore, although they're both good for completely different reasons. And indeed, again, I found this short story collection at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have interesting short story collections like this. A lot of good short stories to choose from, but I chose to talk about this one today. And so without further ado, let's talk about The Man Who Forgot Ray Bradbury. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Man Who Forgot Ray Bradbury focuses on an unnamed narrator. He is a man that recalls that he is losing some of his memories, but doesn't know why. He recalls at one point in his life he lived in a house where things went missing, and he didn't notice until much later, and because people were stealing them and not telling him about it, and that seems to be what it feels like for him right now, with him not realizing that there are gaps in his memory until he needs to recall those certain memories and finds that there's just a blank there. There's nothing for him to recall. And he also, he begins talking about, the works of Ray Bradbury without mentioning Ray Bradbury, referencing, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and The Martian Chronicles, and Fahrenheit 451, saying that he remembers these stories, or what he believes to be stories, but he doesn't know who wrote them. And he's just wondering why he's remembered that, but not the other aspects of it. He also gives an analogy, a story of a pilgrim marching towards a village, and night comes upon the pilgrim, and they've forgotten their prayer book, but they need to pray to God. So they're like, okay, they talk to God, and they just say, I don't remember the prayer that I'm supposed to say, but I'm just going to recite the letters of the alphabet, and you can fill in the blanks from there, so you can see my love for you and whatnot. And that's how the narrator kind of feels at that moment. And they talk about how they memorized books in the hopes that they wouldn't forget, in case someone burned those books, which is what happens in Fahrenheit 451. They insist on blaming God because there must be some reason why they've forgotten, but they've remembered certain things over others. And there's this fixation on those books. Why am I remembering them? Are they not actually books? Are they something else? Are they Like if I don't remember who the author is, is this just knowledge I'm supposed to have for some unknown reason? And ultimately, like that's the question: is like, what is the purpose of my remembering? Am I chosen for something by God, or is it something more sinister? The narrator doesn't really know. And as the story comes to a close, the narrator begins reciting the letters of the alphabet, indicating that it's a conversation with God, them trying to understand why they're remembering. And hopefully God will fill in the blanks from there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit we're talking about with this short story. It certainly does feel more like a thought experiment than an actual like fictional sort of narrative, kind of like the Lady or the Tiger, which I thought was a pretty high quality short story. But one of the main themes, the central idea of the short story, is that of forgetting. The narrator has gaps in their memory. They don't seem to remember who certain authors are, certain aspects of their life are being forgotten for reasons that aren't quite clear. They don't believe that it's happening due to old age or due to disease like dementia or Alzheimer's. So they just have a question about why they're remembering it all. Is there a reason why they remember the plot of these books, which they don't remember the full titles of, and they certainly don't remember the authors of? Is this something about society? Are they supposed to remember? Is this key knowledge, or have they been chosen by some higher power? There's a lot of questions, and what I really like about this is how Gaiman is suggesting that certain forgetting can lead to a reverence. Like, if you remember all these big things, these movies, these TV shows, these other things with these larger-than-life characters, or with these very central, kind of big ideas in those books, like Urgent, Fahrenheit 451 is about dystopia. Like, if you remember that, what does that mean? Like, is that a calling for yourself? And ultimately, like, why can he remember these stories but not Bradbury? And it's sort of leading to a bit of a religion or a cult of personality or something like that, where maybe that's how all religions form, is that people just kind of forget things over time, but they hold certain ideas. And so those ideas from the overarching kind of, narrative of something they've learned, it kind of turns into a religion. And that's partially due to forgetting. That doesn't happen with every religion, but you can see how easy it is to lead yourself to that one, given not everyone's just going to forget things like that, but, stranger things have happened. I like how Gaiman also talks about fear in this story. The narrator fears why they don't remember, as anyone should, or as anyone would. Like, there's that question of why am I forgetting? And there's a lack of control with not remembering. Like, is this meant to protect yourself, or is there something more sinister at play? The narrator doesn't really know, and so there's that fear. Everyone has that fear of growing older and forgetting those essential memories, and the narrator is going through that. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. I am sorry. I lost something there, like a path I was walking that dead-ended, and now I am alone and lost in the forest. And I am here, and I do not know where here is anymore. Kind of like indicating that the narrator's associating their path in life through a forest, like walking along a path. They've lost the path, they lost the thread of why they were in the forest in the first place. And so now all they have is just they're in the forest. Like, how did I get here? How do I get out? If you don't know where to go or why you were here in the first place, that's certainly going to, inspire a lot of fear. It's going to inspire a lot of confusion, and you're going to probably latch on to the first thing you can to get a good foothold, but that might not always be the best thing. There's also the fear of the unknown. Again, like not knowing why you're remembering certain things, or why the forgetting is even happening in the first place. And ultimately, no memory means no control. Human beings love control, and when they lose it, it fills them with all sorts of sadness and fear and doubt and whatnot. And this narrator is definitely a great example of that. But ultimately, You could argue how Neil Gaiman is touching upon the fear of God and his plans, because the narrator constantly refers back to God in this story, like it's God's plan that they had to forget something. But why were they forgetting? The narrator doesn't know, and it could be because God is malevolent, playing a trick on him, or doing something for nefarious purposes. And if it's a benevolent plan, what does God have in store? It's the fact that they don't know, and they can't rely on their memory anymore because that's gone. Maybe the reason why they forgot was there, and that they forgot that in and of itself. So I like how Gaiman is capturing this fear here, and because the narrator is forgetting and whatnot, you have the example of the classic unreliable narrator. Where the narrator thinks this might all just be there might be a reason for the forgetting, like there's a call to a higher power. But again, we can't trust the narrator because they might have learned the reason but instantly forgot it because of memory issues. So Gaiman's giving a pretty good example of that unreliable narrator there. And then there's also the literary allusions that you see, mainly or essentially to Ray Bradbury, because that's the title of the story. Referring to Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, which I haven't read, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is an amazing story. But it's also important to note that Ray Bradbury wrote the short story The Foghorn, which isn't referenced in this story, but it's really good. I talked about it on this channel before. It's just like a man works at a lighthouse, and the foghorn attracts a terrifying sea creature that the narrator of that story doesn't seem to know what that sea creature wants. And you could argue that the same thing is sort of happening here, that the act of forgetting is sort of the narrator kind of being drawn towards that sea creature, that they don't know the purpose of it. They don't know if it's good or bad or if it wants to destroy humanity. But the narrator is confronting that existential fear of no longer having that memory and being, forced to confront a God that might not be all that great. So a lot of interesting stuff from Bradbury to consider in this story, even if maybe Gaiman doesn't directly mention the foghorn. And like all Gaiman stories, this is psychological, very much inside the narrator's head. I have a feeling it's more like it's knowledge that Gaiman kind of sides on two different things, either very heavy mythological stories or very psychological stories, much in the character's head and exploring how they see the world. And yeah, this one feels much more psychological than mythological, although mythology can come out of what's going on with the narrator here. But I do feel like I wanted a little bit more. It's mostly in the narrator's head, and it's also more of a thought experiment than anything else. And I feel like I need a little bit more. I feel like this story would have gone above and beyond if there was some narrative thread pulling it along, showing how the narrator goes about finding out that they've forgotten things, and maybe putting them in a situation where that would prove most disadvantageous, adding a little bit more oomph there. It's a fine short story otherwise, but again, it could have been a little bit more. It could have had more oomph there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Man Who Forgot Ray Bradbury, a pretty good short story by Neil Gaiman. Not one of the better stories that he's told, and I certainly feel like there's more interesting ones in this collection. There's one called Orange, which is about it's a sort of a list of answers to questions that were posed, or that are about like a man who's being questioned about a supernatural event that took place. It's very fascinating, and other short stories in this collection are similarly good. So I definitely recommend that you seek this out. Maybe again, find it at your local library. There might be some high quality reads for you there, and including this short story. Otherwise, go out and find it, because it's always good to actually buy Neil Gaiman's works. But yeah, if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author if they don't already know, and this short story and collection as well. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and memory loss-based travels. Farewell.